Hello and welcome to ThePrint. The Household Consumption Expenditure Survey is out and we have with us Professor Pronab Sen. He's a former Chief Statistician of India and he is going to help us make sense of this survey. So according to you, what are the key takeaways from the survey? What is the state of household expenditure in rural and urban India?
Well, the survey seems to suggest that we are more or less on the same trajectory that we've been on for the last, God knows what, 30 years. So there's nothing which is surprising in it. However, before I can say this categorically, I think I should make it clear that this survey may not be comparable to our earlier surveys. Because there has been a very significant change in the methodology.
Right, I was coming to that, yeah.
Yeah, but this one has to bring up right up in front. Because when you change methodologies, then it isn't obvious that the data is entirely comparable. The differences are not likely to be large, but we cannot say for sure that they are comparable. That's number one. Number two, this is the first time we've used the new methodology. Right? So we cannot be sure that this methodology is robust. We have to do it one more time at least to check whether the methodology is giving the right kind of responses. So we've got the second survey in the field at the moment. So that will be finished at the end of June. And only after that will we be able to say with certainty that we've got a robust methodology for collecting this data.
In layperson terms, could you explain what is very rudimentarily the difference in the methodologies that have been used?
Yeah, you see, the difference in methodology was that earlier we used to visit a household only once, right? And there would be one person from that household who would answer the survey, usually the head of the household.
Right.
So it was one person at one shot. The problem that cropped up is that, every time new products come into the market, we have to include it in the survey.
Right.
So over the years, the length of the survey just became longer and longer and longer. So originally when they had started, it used to be about 1.5 hours. Last time we did it, it took almost 2.5 hours.
Right.
Right. And now there are two problems with that. The first problem is that the person responding after talking for 2 hours is tired.
Yeah.
Right. So his responses become vaguer and vaguer as you go down the list of items. The second problem is he gets irritated. So there's a lot of pushback from the respondents. So the methodology that we are trying this time is that although the list is even longer than it was earlier, in fact significantly longer, we are paying the same household 3 visits, right? So we've split the questionnaire up into 3 parts and we are going 3 times and asking one part of the questionnaire, right? Now the problem with that is, number one, you cannot guarantee it's the same person who will answer all 3. It could be 3 different persons.
True, yeah.
Whoever is there, right? That's big change. The second is that because the questionnaire is now shorter each time, it's about 40-45 minutes, we think that the quality of data should be much better because the person isn't getting tired. But that's complicated also by the fact that, if I were asking you a question about how much do you spend, somewhere at the back of your mind you would have, I've spent roughly so many rupees this month.
Correct.
But when I'm asking 3 different persons, they may not have the same number in the head. So there is an issue here.
True.
Okay, and that's why we need to do it twice to see whether the replies we get are consistent within each visit.
Right. Relatedly, in an interview to Mint, I think you mentioned that we need more periodic surveys with a smaller sample size to ascertain the credibility of these findings. Is this related to what you were just mentioning? Can you elaborate what you mean by sort of more regular surveys and with sort of smaller sample sizes?
No, that is not for this actually.
Okay.
This we cannot work with smaller sizes.
Okay.
Simply because the questionnaire is so long. And India is so diverse in terms of its, not just the communities that we have, it's diverse in terms of culture, and all of this affect your spending pattern. So already the sample size, I think, is already too small.
Oh, okay.
Okay, the sample size should go up, and the problem.
What should it be according to you? What should roughly the sample size?
We are doing about 1,40,000 households. We should be doing closer to 2 lakhs. Okay, but the problem is that these sort of surveys are very time consuming, number one, and they are very expensive.
True.
They cost a lot of money. So there is a limit to how much we can do. So we have to settle for what's feasible within the budget.
Coming back to the findings of the survey, this government sort of welfare programs have been talked about a lot, and so switching to political economy a little bit, how have this government's programs, particularly the welfare programs, changed the consumption patterns of people according to you?
That is difficult to say. You see, there are two kinds of welfare programs, right? One is welfare programs which are in cash. And a lot of this government's programs are cash based.
True, yeah.
Right? That's going to show up in their expenditure. Because they will spend it as if it were their income. So it shouldn't change the pattern, except that the income levels would be higher than they were earlier. So the second is what is given in kind, like free food.
Yeah.
You know, and then some states have free bicycles, and
Right.
there's all sorts of freebies that are given in kind. Those are being captured. And then the question becomes, is how do you put a value on those? Because they're getting it free, right? And that can change their expenditure pattern. Because think of somebody who's got a bicycle, right? That household may not have been planning to buy a bicycle anyway, right? So they just treat this as an add-on, and it would have no dramatic effect. But supposing the household were planning to buy a bicycle, then their expenditure pattern would shift. So that's very difficult to make out.
But any visible trends that you could
Not very much, because you know, what we've measured, as I said, are particularly transfers in kind. Now the big one there clearly is food.
Yeah.
Right? But even with that, and when we do the evaluation of the free, so we impute a value to it using market prices, what we are getting is that the total value of in-kind transfers is only about 87, 88 rupees per person per month. Now that's not a whole lot, right? So it's not going to be that distortionary, or it's not going to add that much.
But is there, as has been reported, a shift to sort of more nutrient-rich food like?
That is a trend that's been happening for a while. So what has been happening is cereal consumption has been steadily coming down per person, and has been substituted.
And that is since when broadly?
At least last 30 years, since the 90s.
Okay.
Every time we've done it, cereal consumption has come down a bit. All right.
What do you attribute this to?
Basically, people who were eating a lot of cereals was because that is the cheapest form of food that you can get. Right? So as their earning power goes up, they will consume the same amount of food, but with lesser cereals and more vegetables and so on.
Also, the Niti Aayog's CEO pointed out that India now just has 5% poverty. What does that actually mean?
No, he's qualified himself. I mean, I saw the interview. He said that using the old poverty line, right? So the old poverty, you have to understand that poverty lines are not independent from the survey data. So you cannot change the survey and use an old poverty line. Okay, that is just technically incorrect. So if you use the old poverty line on this data, he's right. It's about 5%. However, we need people who work on poverty issues, academics, to revisit the poverty line and decide whether or not the old poverty line is actually appropriate or not. My own suspicion is that it is not appropriate. Okay, and the poverty line should be changed.
To what? Could you explain?
We don't know. Because as I said, earlier what would happen is the answers towards the end of the questionnaire would become very vague, usually understated. And that was mostly the consumer durables. That was the sequencing of the questions, right? Here, consumer durables are a separate visit. So the amount being spent on consumer durables has gone up a lot. Right? If that was the case, then the poverty line, which has virtually zero consumer durables in it, may have to take that into account.
One of the burning questions following the release of the survey is whether this economy has been facing a rural consumption slowdown or not. Does this survey tell you anything about this?
Well, let me put it in context. What this survey is saying, again, I'm making a comparison with 11-12, which I said may or may not be proper, is that on the average, the consumption per person has been growing at about 3% per year. Now, that's not a whole lot. Right? And the difference between rural and urban is not very high. Rural is a little above 3% and urban is a little below 3%. But it's roughly at the 3 odd percent level. So, yes, there's a little bit of difference, but nothing significant and nothing which is well off trend. Okay, there's been a lot of talking about first time the rural consumption as a percentage of urban consumption has actually gone up, which is true, and that is something worth looking at. But that requires a lot more analysis than we have had time to do at the moment.
And if we look at sort of a region-wise analysis, are there some takeaways about the North-South divide from this survey? Are North Indians consuming differently from
people? Oh, they always have. Yes. They always have. The
what does the survey tell us?
Consumption patterns are dramatically different.
Any sort of new takeaways from this survey?
No, because that requires a much more detailed mapping. And as of now, we are still scratching the surface. We still don't have the full data, remember. All we have is the fact sheet. Right? The detailed data will come once the report is released. That's when I think much more of the probing questions can be asked.
Right.
We are not there yet.
Right. And I know you said that, for the last 30 years, the sort of expenditure levels have been similar. But if you were to compare 10 years of UPA with now the 10 years of NDA, are there any differences worthwhile that you see?
In the patterns, no.
No.
Not really. Not really.
One of the central debates in again the political economy, also in context of the survey, has been regarding the K-shaped recovery. How do you analyze it given these numbers?
That has to be again done very, very carefully. Again, I would not stick my neck out on this because you see what has happened is that with the this large return migration that took place during the lockdown,
Yes.
if you recall, the population balance between rural and urban areas has changed. Right? Our surveys do not take into account these changes. So we will have to actually sit down and look at, is there a unexpected or unexplained change in the average household size? If there is, we're going to have to start making corrections. So this is a much more detailed exercise. But this is a data point which has to be seen carefully. So we are used to having migration from villages to cities.
To cities,
That's a part of the way we do
It's
things.
been reversed.
This is the only first time where it got reversed, and it was reversed in a big way. Remember, but this is 22-23 data, and there were some reports of journalistic reports that there's some migrants who have come back to this.
Yeah.
We don't know how many went. We don't know how many have returned. Right. So we're going to have to look at the data very, very carefully, especially in terms of household sizes. Are we seeing unexpected? Normally, household size changes are very, very, very gradual.
Correct, yeah.
So we'll have to check whether there's something going on there.
My last question to you, sir. The Indian official statistical system has been under some kind of under the scanner for the last few years. Its credibility has been sort of a subject of debate. Where do we stand regarding its credibility now, and has the release of this survey helped turn a corner in some way?
Not really. I don't think we've got a peculiar situation where the official statistical system is being attacked by the official system itself. That's the peculiarity. I mean, it's not something coming from outside. The basic sort of external view on Indian statistics is not on the quality of the data per se, but on the release of data. A lot of data which people had come to expect was simply not being released. And there's a question mark on that. And that is a question not for the statistical system, but for the larger governmental system to answer.
Professor Sen, thank you so much for
You're
speaking with
welcome.
us.